Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our session. Today, we're going to be talking about automating complex processes in SAP ECC and SAP S/4HANA and how you can use that to drive better business results. I'm Andrew Hayden. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for our Automate products here at Precisely, and I'll be your host today. So for those of you in the SAP community who may not be familiar with Precisely, Precisely is the leader in data integrity. And in 2021, we acquired Windshuttle, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And we've added Windshuttle's world-class SAP automation portfolio to our broader portfolio of data quality, data governance, location intelligence, all the data integrity products you need. And we feel this combination really gives our SAP customers a great opportunity to improve their overall just abilities to use their data more efficiently and make better decisions. A little bit more information about Precisely. As I mentioned, we are the leader in data integrity, and we've got about 12,000 customers worldwide. That's in over 100 countries. We're in 99 of the Fortune 100, and we've got about 2,300 employees. And we're trusted by many of the largest brands in the world. So they trust us with their data, and they trust their data with our products. And hopefully you can too. One more thing before we get started. If you have questions as we go through the presentation, please type them into the chat box, into the Q&A box, and just be assured somebody will get back to you either during this presentation or afterwards. So your question will not go unanswered. Somebody from Precisely will get back to you and answer it. So let's get started. Often when I talk about automation, I like to start with this quote from Justin Trudeau. And the quote is, "The pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again." And when you think about what's happening in the business world, and especially in the processes that we manage in SAP, so it's our manufacturing processes, it's our plant maintenance processes, it's products, materials, you name it, all of those critical things, the pace at which the world affects what we do with that data and how we use our SAP system is constantly accelerating. And what we're going to talk about today is how you can use automation to try and really rein in some of that acceleration and manage it more efficiently and more effectively throughout your business and throughout your SAP system. And what's driving a lot of this acceleration? Well, a lot of it's just driven by the explosion in data that we've seen in the past 2 decades. We're using so much more data and we're gathering so much more data. And data is really what we're using to make better decisions in our businesses. But often it can be overwhelming. And what are we doing to try and capture and manage that data better? Well, it's estimated that in the past year, approximately $1.3 trillion was spent on digital transformation efforts. And that's everything across the digital transformation spectrum, from hardware, software, services, everything we're doing internally. So it's a huge amount of money that we're investing. And a few years ago, when KPMG went out and did their global CEO survey, and this was during the pandemic, they also found that about 80% of CEOs globally are accelerating their digital transformation efforts. They realized that a lot of the disruptions that were happening during the pandemic really could be managed better through digital transformation. So suddenly the processes that were happening in an office setting, you needed to be able to manage more in a more distributed way. With the upsets that we've had in things like supply chain and our customers, everything that's happened there, being able to transform that digitally and manage it more efficiently became absolutely critical. And also during this KPMG survey, one of the things they found was that about 2/3 of CEOs found that they're spending more money on technology than on people. And that makes sense when you look at these other 2 things. You're spending a lot of money on digital transformation, you're emphasizing it more. But the one key thing when you started to dig into this data was it's not that they're replacing people with technology. What they're looking for is technologies that can supplement the people they've got, that can allow the people they've got to be more efficient and more effective and manage this massive amount of data collecting. So it's not about one or the other. It's not a black or white situation where you're going to go, I'm either going to hire, buy more technology or hire more people and hire less people, I guess, in this case. It's really all about how do I make the people I have more efficient? And how do I find technologies that are really going to help my staff optimize the processes that they have. And this is where automation really comes in and can help drive a lot of those efficiencies and better business, despite this massive amount of data that we're collecting more and more every day. And along with gathering more data, we're seeing a lot of other things change in our world. We're digitalizing a lot more processes. So we're seeing and using fewer and fewer manual forms. We're using fewer manual data entry processes, less manual routing of information, and more of it's becoming digital. The thing that we've seen over the past several years is we've digitalized individual processes, but often those processes are connected. And this is where automation now allows you to create an end-to-end process that's made up of all these smaller processes. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what those processes can look like in SAP and how you can link them all together. The other thing we're seeing is a need to adapt to business model dynamics. The dynamics of the business market have changed significantly in the recent past. Again, the pandemic has driven a lot of change that we've needed to make. But just in general, the introduction of new technologies, the ability of technology to help support our business has become more important, and it's created these new business models. And being able to adjust and adapt to those has become more critical than ever. And then there's this increasing importance of analytics. I talked about how Precisely is the leader in data integrity. And one of the key things about analytics is, obviously, we're looking to manage or to measure more and more things throughout our business, and we're gathering all that data, but we have to make sure that the data that's in our systems is correct. And automation can help us get that data and make sure that the data that we put into our systems is correct right on the front. So at the first time, right every time. And where does SAP fit in all this? Well, the SAP data for most of our companies is the strategic data that powers many of those critical business processes. We use it to power our finance and accounting operations, our controlling operations, manufacturing, plant maintenance, logistics. All of these things are housed in that SAP digital core. And one of the key things to understand is often these things are connected. You can't, when you add a vendor into your system or a new supplier, they don't just come in and it's not just about that supplier. It's about the materials that supplier is providing. It's the plants that those materials are going to go to. It's how do you pay that supplier? So finance gets involved, logistics gets involved. If you do custom products, sales gets involved because you want to make sure that the materials that are being provided are the right ones for the custom products that your customers purchase. So there's a lot of interdependence of this data throughout your SAP system. And one of the core things we've seen talking to our customers is that within SAP, there are a lot of challenges in SAP master data management. And these are ubiquitous, whether we're talking about ECC or whether we're talking about S/4HANA. We spend a lot of time with SAP customers and SAP users, and these three seem to come up over and over and over again. There are slow, error-prone manual activities. And this is manual data entry, it's manual data management of a process, it's all these things that are done by humans, which unfortunately, humans are just error-prone. We enter error into a process. So one of the areas that we see is people will work in Excel spreadsheets and they'll go through a review and approval process that's often driven by email. And you get to the end, you've got approved data, and somebody at the end of it manually enters that data into SAP. So you've entered error at the end. And what we want to do is show you ways that automation can eliminate that risk that you've added at the end of your process. Lack of process compliance and visibility. I know in the United States, SOX audits are critically important for many of our customers. And not having visibility into your process and not being able to audit your process, what happened, when, where are the bottlenecks is critical. So automation is one way that you can find out what's happening when and where throughout a complex process. And again, this is not dependent on whether it's an ECC process or an S/4HANA process. This is true across the entire SAP landscape. And then these complex onboarding and management processes for suppliers, vendors, customers, business partners. It's one of the areas where we find a significant amount of not only complexity, but problems with the data at the front end can create a lot of problems downstream. So if you've put in the wrong information for a vendor or for the materials that vendor is providing, it just creates a cascading effect all the way down. Same thing if you've got a problem with your customer data. You ship to the wrong location, you ship the wrong thing, you've billed the wrong people. Those kind of things are problematic, to say the least. So simplifying and automating those onboarding and management processes for your accounts can be absolutely critical. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in the future as well. And the reality of it is, I mentioned this before, processes and data in SAP are interdependent. You can't really separate the processes you're using to create and manage data from the data itself. You can't do a process improvement initiative without looking at the data that process is creating and managing. Because if it's creating bad data, it doesn't do you any good. You're just putting bad data faster. Same thing on data. If you're working on data quality, you have to look at the data processes that are creating and managing that data. And exact same problem. These two things are interdependent. And this is true throughout, whether you're talking about things like product launches, your overall product data management. If you think about the vendors, materials, customers, that value chain, if you will, all of that product data is absolutely critical. Onboarding, I talked about earlier, asset management. I don't know how many customers I've talked to about the complexity of their asset management processes and the challenges that creates. So a lot of importance in those areas about the data and how that process works. And then underlying it all is your financial master data. So what happens in finance, if everything that you do in your company touches finance, whether it's you're going to pay for materials, it's the value add that you have throughout a manufacturing process, the invoicing of customers so that you're getting paid on time, all of these things, everything touches finance. And this is where automation comes in. And this is where automation is so important, because you want to make sure that automation makes an impact across your entire SAP landscape. It's not about one module. It's not about one process. It's really about the entire value stream. Master data, the big four, if we will, materials, customer, vendor, and finance are just that tip of the iceberg. They're just a little bit of what we're talking about, because you need automation that's going to address all of the processes that are associated with that and all of the things that happen with it. So for materials, it's things like bills of materials, routings. In finance, it again is those account management processes, it's journal entries. We've talked about vendor, we've talked about customer, but it's all of those things. And it's not just the master data. There's often significant amounts of transactional data that are attached to them. And you want to make sure that if you're automating a process, that you're looking at a way or you're looking at systems and you're looking at platforms that are going to be able to address all of that across the entire spectrum of what you're working with. And this goes across the landscape. Like I said, all of these things are interdependent and interconnected. Financial accounting, obviously, that's where you're going to manage your money. Controlling, it's the valuation of things. It's doing that margin analysis. And obviously in S/4HANA, when you're having to implement material ledger, doing margin analysis is much easier. So you've got ways to do things now that you didn't before, but there's still the data that goes with it and the processes associated with that data and being able to find ways to automate that. And again, all of these different systems in various ways are interconnected. The financial information tends to be the thing that glues it all together. But like I said, vendors and materials go hand in hand. Logistics often goes hand in hand with customers. Asset management works across your organization. So there's lots of different ways that data in your SAP systems is going to rely on other parts of the system and needs to be interconnected. And you need to find ways for automation to make that more efficient. It's not just about HR managing the HR data. It's about how does that data affect other modules within SAP. And this, again, is where automation can help. It can help connect these modules and these processes together. Another aspect about automation and a good automation platform is it's going to be able to make an impact at scale. It's not just about one department or one aspect or one process within SAP. It's about a combination of being able to streamline those processes at the user level and efficiently manage all of what's happening through your automation system. So you've got platform administrators that can be centralized and look at your entire automation landscape. We believe very strongly that your solution authors, the people who actually create your automation solutions, need to be close to the processes. It's not about a business team turning things over to the IT team necessarily. It's about that business team being able to actually develop much of that automation as close as possible, or those functional specific SAP teams that understand those processes being able to work with the business teams to develop that process automation. Because those are the people who know those processes inside and out. And you can significantly speed up how fast speed up your ability to get automations deployed throughout your organization quickly and easily. And then there's the actual business users. You want to make sure that it's one that business users are comfortable with and that it's friendly for them to use. And we'll talk about more of that in just a couple of minutes. Another thing about complex processes is very rarely are they a single process. Most of the complex processes that we talk about, especially that are associated with SAP, again, whether it's ECC or S/4HANA, they're often made up of, their processes made up of sub-processes, multiple sub-processes. So it's not just about a vendor supplied material and your vendor information. It's that material, what is that material? It may have to go to 1, 2, 3, multiple plants. Each one of those plants is making something different, and you may have a different, that single material goes into multiple products coming out of multiple plants. You want to know what's happening, not only just across those plants, but with the various products that you're producing. And if there's a material that you need to be able to manage through multiple processes, you need visibility into that. So streamlining and automating those complex processes does a number of things for you. It streamlines that data collection process that happens at many different parts of your organization. It gives you visibility into that entire process. And you can look at it from both centralized and decentralized data. There's centralized materials data, and there's often plant level materials or plant level bills of materials. So keep that in mind. If you're just looking at a process in isolation, you're probably looking too small, and you really want to be able to connect all of those various processes together and monitor and see what's happening throughout. And precisely what we believe is that you should be looking for a complete automation platform. And in our world, an automation platform includes these aspects to it. It includes desktop automation and it includes process automation. So let's talk about desktop automation first. Desktop automation in our world is Excel to SAP. Most of our customers, we find, still do a significant amount of their data management and their data management and creation processes in Excel. The problem, however, is that those Excel processes are often ungoverned. There's manual data entry throughout. There's manual routing, often through email chains and things of that sort. And that's just very inefficient, but it's also a risk to your business because there are so many errors that can be introduced. And as I mentioned earlier, we have had a number of customers come to us and go, we've got this process that uses an Excel sheet and it goes through, it gets through review and approval. And at the end, somebody's manually entering the data into SAP. So now your approved data is not necessarily what's in SAP. With desktop automation, what it gives you is the ability to monitor those Excel files, what's happening at that Excel file throughout the process. It gives you the ability to validate the data against SAP before it gets posted. And we'll talk more about, when we get to the process automation side, how to use those in a more complex process. So really, when we talk about desktop automation and Excel to SAP, we're talking about using the Excel file to replace multiple SAP screens. So in the SAP GUI, you're going from multiple screens to a single business-friendly Excel file. And that Excel file can be governed. It can be set up exactly the way you want it to be set up. And you can see everything at once. And with the ability to validate that data against SAP before you post it, you actually can see those error messages in the Excel file, correct them there before everything goes into SAP. So you know that the data that gets posted to SAP is correct. So what's an example of this? Well, one example of a customer we've had who's used this desktop automation to great effect is Dorman. Now, Dorman is a supplier to the automotive industry, and they had a challenge, and it was a seemingly simple challenge. They just had to change a subset of materials to be listed from manufactured to kitted. Simple change, should be fairly easy, but it affects things like bills of materials, routings, sales orders. They needed to make sure that all this stuff was reflected. When they did analysis, they figured that doing it the way they traditionally done it, for every 100 materials would take about 60 hours and it would cost about $4,000. Now, this was going to require them to hire temporary staff, and they have thousands of these materials. When they discovered desktop automation and they discovered that Excel to SAP capability, they found that they could do those same 100 materials in about 5 hours, and it was going to cost them a little less than $400. So what does that mean to them? Well, it means they don't have to go hire temporary staff. Their current people can do it. And this is one of the things I mentioned earlier. They're looking, CEOs are looking to replace or to spend more on technology than they are on people. And this is a great example of what that looks like. You're using a technology solution to make the current people you have more efficient and more effective. And for Dorman, in the first quarter that they implemented this, they saved about $125,000. Now, in the grand scheme of a very large corporation, that may not sound like a lot. But again, they have thousands of these materials, and that's one simple process that they were able to use desktop automation on to save a considerable amount of money. Now, imagine if you've got multiple processes throughout your organization, even if it's just within a single department, and you've got these mass data changes you need to make that are going to be highly complicated and very expensive to do in your traditional way. This is where desktop automation can drive a lot of efficiency through, into your company and into your organizations. Now, the other aspect of a complete automation platform is process automation. And in our world, process automation comes in two flavors. One is Excel workflow, and the other is Foreman workflow. So Excel workflow is the ability to take those desktop automation files, the ones that are Excel files that are enabled for desktop automation, and manage them through a complex workflow. And a good example of this is something like journal entries. So often finance and accounting departments get journal entries, they're managing them in an Excel file, and then it has to go through multiple layers of review and approval, depending on the value of that journal entry. And many of these journal entries can be hundreds or thousands of lines long. Now, imagine being able to, if you're doing that and you've got a very manual process. So you've got the Excel file that's being managed manually, it's being routed through email, you don't really know where things are, and you're trying to do all this in a very short closing window. With Excel workflow, what you're able to do now, manage that file through a complex workflow if you need to. If it's got multi-tiered review and approval, depending on the value of the journal entry, now you can automate that entire thing. You can send notifications, and you can even do the approvals within an email. So the process that goes from being manual and ungoverned is now automated and governed. And again, you're able to validate that data against SAP before it gets posted. And with Excel workflow, what you're able to do is once that final approval is received, it automatically posts to SAP. There's no manual data entry at the end. Now, the other process is Foreman workflow. And what does Foreman workflow give you? Well, Foreman workflow gives you business-friendly forms that any user can see. And often if you're doing them as a role-based form, it means that for an account creation, let's say, the person who needs to fill out a certain part of that form, that's all they see is they just get a request for the information they need to provide. So procurement may start a vendor create, but it has to go to your materials management. It has to go generally to finance. There are multiple departments in your organization. Manufacturing operations probably needs to see it. Logistics needs to see it. So all of that, being able to send each one of them just a form that says, here's the information we need from you, or here's the information you need to know, is critical. It streamlines the process significantly. And again, when all that data is created, it's been validated against SAP, it automatically gets posted. So you've sped up the process considerably. The workflow automation gives you a number of benefits. And this is true whether you're talking about Excel workflow or whether you're talking about Foreman workflow. And again, these processes are valid whether you're looking at ECC or whether you're looking at S/4HANA, because that data creation and management process often still happens outside of SAP. It happens before you're going to post that data into SAP. Being able to route business-friendly forms. So you've got role-based forms, you know where they're going to go. Same thing with those Excel workbooks. And you can set this up. It's a simple drag and drop. Let's build our workflow very cleanly and very clearly. Your business rules are built into it. And one of the other critical things about automation is you want to make sure that the SAP credentials that the individual has are what are being used for them to manage data through. You want to make sure that if somebody has SAP credentials to do one thing, that's the only thing they can. You don't want to give them carte blanche to do whatever they feel like doing throughout SAP. That's a critical part of the security and the mitigating risk in your SAP system. And at least with the Precisely products, that's something that we do. We rely on those SAP credentials for our automation. And again, the other critical thing with automation is you want to make sure that the automation platform that you adopt is able to digitize and accelerate any SAP process. Again, whether we're talking about product launches and manufacturing processes, customer and vendor onboarding, plant maintenance, financial accounting, again, human resources, anywhere across your SAP landscape, you want to make sure that that platform can work anywhere across there. Not in each one of these, because the processes often cross all of these. So having an automation platform that can address any SAP process and all SAP processes, absolutely critical. And again, we're talking about both SAP ECC, and SAP S/4HANA. Now, from a platform capability standpoint, there's a few things we recommend looking for. And obviously, these are all things that we deliver, but go out and compare platforms. See if everybody can do these same things for you. Again, what we talk about, it's that choice of forms or Excel workbooks, whichever one is going to make the most sense for you. It's the flexibility you need to implement an interface and an automation interface that's right for your group. Dynamic process linking. Dynamic process linking is what I mentioned earlier, where processes in SAP and manufacturing processes aren't individual. They're made up of lots of different sub-processes. And you want to make sure that all of those processes are linked and connected and you know what's happening with each one. And also when a process finishes and it needs to kick off another process, that happens automatically. So there's no lag time and there's no bottlenecks that are introduced into that process. You want your automation to be as smooth and as seamless as possible. Process dashboard. Mentioned that earlier. If you're doing things like audits, you need to know what's happening when and where, but you also need to know as things are going through the process, what's the status? How long is this going to take? Are we on schedule? Are we behind? Is somebody not going through and doing the reviews and approvals they need to do? Is something not happening in a timely manner? So having those dashboards available is critical as well. Automating that exchange of data with SAP, whether you're extracting data out of SAP to do something to it, whether you need to do a modification like Dorman did, or whether you're extracting it and then having to repost it back in, or you've got it as part of a complex process. You want to make sure that entire exchange with SAP is automated. The live data validation I mentioned earlier, and then that user and policy management. Data stewardship is a big one for us. So what are those guardrails? What can they do? If you're setting up a form, you want to make sure that what goes into the fields in that form is the right information. Things don't go in the wrong place. Or you can have things like drop-down menus. Also within forms and even within the Excel workbooks, you want to be able to do like SAP F4 lookups. What are the specific things you need to happen? So all of these things are important, and you want to ensure that that data that goes in is right the first time. And we can help you do that. And that's one of the things that automation is absolutely critical for, is making sure you're increasing that and improving that data quality throughout your SAP system. And part of this goes back to, again, if you're using analytics, you're using the data to make better business decisions. The integrity of that data is absolutely critical. You need to be confident that it's right. So that data stewardship capability that is in our automation platform can help you have the confidence in the data right up front. I mentioned the process dashboards. This is an example of what one can look like. So you know where you are throughout that process, what's happening with the individual projects that you're working on, everything that's been submitted, where is it and how long is it going to take? Or if it's completed, you know that. We find a lot of customers really appreciate these dashboards, especially in finance or in closing period. Which of these journal entries that are going through have been approved? Which ones have not? What is the bottleneck? What's the holdup? when you're on tight deadlines, it's very important to know what's happening throughout those processes. We can deliver that for you. So a quick case study for form and workflow, and especially when you're talking about these product data processes. One of our customers is an energy drink company, and they were challenged with a lot of slow manual processes. They basically ran all of their product introduction, all of their product manufacturing processes off of a spreadsheet. They referred to it as they were in spreadsheet hell, because it was, my understanding is, it was one massive workbook with lots of little worksheets within it, and different people had responsibility within different worksheets, and that got routed usually through email. There was a huge lack of visibility throughout the process, but it worked for them. As long as they were geographically constrained, it worked okay. They did a deal with one of the major soft drinks manufacturers for global distribution, and all of a sudden, their complexity exploded. Suddenly, you've got new suppliers, you've got new plants, you've got new customers, you have all of these things. And for energy drinks or any other food and beverage product, you now have local requirements. There's certain things that certain countries can only allow you to put some ingredients in where others don't. Language requirements, all of these things. And what happened was that spreadsheet process became a huge bottleneck. And what we helped them do was go in and automate that new product introduction process from end to end through a single, really a single interface. And we worked with them on 3 of their specific processes. One was merchandise. Energy drinks business, merchandise is key. It's a big part of their business, actually. But again, being able to localize that supply chain and that distribution and that manufacturing, and making sure they had those goods coordinated with what was happening in the marketplace, absolutely critical to them. And we were able to automate that for them. The other one was materials. Materials, suddenly, as I mentioned before, they had new vendors. They were dealing with lots more plants. Things needed to go to different places. They were in countries they'd never been in. You had language considerations, you had currency considerations. All of this stuff now was very clearly managed and automated through a common forms interface. It simplified the process for them. And then the other one was the actual manufacturing of the beverages. So your packaging and your ingredients manufacturing, all that stuff that goes along with energy drinks. What they found at the end was they had reduced their new product introduction cycle times by between 50 and 75, depending on what the product was and a few other factors. But still, imagine cutting your time in half for how long it takes you to get a product to market. Increase their visibility and improve their overall governance. One of the things that they admitted was before, they really didn't have good visibility or governance into that spreadsheet-driven process. And they felt like every time they had to launch a new product, they felt like they were starting from scratch. Now they've got a standardized, regular process. It happens over and over again, and it's repeatable. And that's absolutely critical for their business. So that is one way that automating those complex processes can help you achieve, your business goals in this highly dynamic marketplace that we live in today. So those are some examples of how automation can help you today with both ECC and S/4HANA processes. And what's next? What do we see coming down the pipeline? There's integration into larger and more complex processes. There are many different systems that connect to SAP in different ways, and being able to automate those larger processes helps your business even further, because it's more than just SAP, it's everything in your business. Artificial intelligence and machine learning, being able to predict what needs to happen next in a process, or add, do field fills automatically based on previous activities, be able to simplify your business rules and learn how your business works, and make sure all those things are followed. So we see that happening very quickly, and it's becoming more and more common to find that. And then Fiori process automation. S/4HANA does a lot of things really well, but as we work with more customers and as more customers discover the benefits and some of the pitfalls of Fiori, we're getting more and more requests to be able to automate aspects of that Fiori process. So look forward to those things coming down the road in the future. I think there are things that from an automation standpoint, we're going to see happen in the SAP environment in the relatively near future. And finally, I just want to close with the quote I started with. Then this quote from Justin Trudeau of the pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be slow again. Yeah, as I mentioned, things change very quickly. Obviously, the amount of data that we're collecting, the way we're collecting it, the dynamics in the marketplace are constantly accelerating. And we firmly believe at Precisely that automation is your key to being able to manage that rate of acceleration, to be able to manage that massive amount of data that you're collecting, to be able to make sure that data is right and correct and of the highest quality and governed throughout your entire process. And ultimately, it's about using that data to make better decisions. And finally, if you have questions, if you want to know more information, let's definitely continue this conversation. You can find more information about our SAP automation product at precisely.com. You also can still find information on windshuttle.com. So you can find demos, white papers, case studies, lots of information there. But if you have a specific question or you have a specific use case in mind, definitely get in touch with us directly. You can contact us through the contact me form or the get in touch form on precisely.com, or you can call us and we will set up a half-hour call to really address what it is and understand what it is that you are looking for and how we can help you drive greater efficiency through your SAP processes. Finally, I just want to thank everyone for coming today. Hopefully you have a much better idea of how automation and process automation through your SAP S/4HANA processes can help drive greater efficiencies and help you really get better business results over time. I appreciate your being here, and I hope everyone has a happy and healthy day. Thanks a lot.